to be broken.
What's the most incredible, elaborate author, and I just imagine him painting all over my life, and I just want my life to be his greatest masterpiece.
Learn to embrace your body and stop being ashamed.
Hi everyone.
Hi, welcome to another week of
Girl Talk. Glad to have you with us this evening. It's so cool to be with you again. We're excited. We've got interesting topics that we want to talk about, real girly stuff, but nothing for you guys to run away from. It's all good. And hopefully if there's any men watching, you'll get something out of it.
Absolutely.
Let's introduce ourselves. I'm Erica.
I'm Danny.
I'm Sam.
And this is Girl Talk. So we want to talk tonight about self-love. But before we go there, I just want to introduce you to Sam. We've known Sam for many, many years. And she has an incredible charity called Tiny Toes, Tiny Feet. She's multi-talented, we have these incredible women on this show. So let me introduce her, let her introduce herself to you and just tell you a little bit about herself before we go over into the topic.
Thank you, Pastor Erica. Thank you for having me on the show. So as I said, my name is Sam and I founded a charity 4 years ago. And it's called Tiny Toes, Tiny Feet, and we are a baby bank, and we operate in the Hillingdon, Northwood, Watford area. And it's going really, really well. We are also looking to extend our service to provide a women's refuge as well. So we're just in the process of doing that. But
Awesome.
We basically provide free baby essentials to women who are referred to us. A lot of the times they've gone through like human trafficking and modern slavery and domestic abuse and all those sorts of things. So unfortunately we're doing really well. It's not a nice thing, but at least we're there to help them
And support
them.
So what if anyone wanted to donate items? What can they do? How do they get in touch with you?
So if you we actually have a drop-off session this Saturday at our space, which is in Rickmansworth. It's from 11 o'clock to 12:30 p.m. So you can go onto my website or you can drop me an email. It's tinytoestinyfeet@gmail.com. I'm sure we'll put something up afterwards. But we really do want good quality things that you would want your children or be happy for your children to use.
Or they can just give you money, right?
Or you can give me money. We do have a Just Giving page.
Yes.
We have a Just Giving page as
Wonderful.
well. So we're moving at the end of the month. So we need as much money as we can to just pay for our new place and just be able to support women and families. Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you.
That is absolutely amazing. But
So I'm going to introduce to you tonight's topic. So when we were talking about this topic, it's something that I think resonated with all of us. I think it is something that we've all had to face in different aspects of our life throughout our adult life, and sometimes for some of you it may go further back than that. So tonight's topic is all about self-love. So when I say that, I'm sure that there's lots of things that spring to mind when you think self-love. So sometimes people might think, self-love is pampering and going to the spa and doing my nails and doing my hair, and I'm sure lots of you want to do that, seeing as everything's opening back up.
Desperately.
But we want to just take it a little bit deeper than that tonight. And one of the things that we as a show really pride ourselves on is that we tackle real issues and we talk about real topics. So we really want to take it a little bit deeper tonight, but we're going to start off with something really fun, I think. Something that is going to encourage you to kind of self-reflect. We're all about self-reflection, and when we were discussing, we were like, what's a visual and practical thing? We know we love a practical thing on this show of what we could do that would represent self-love to us. And for me, it's so amazing how many people never hear words of affirmation spoken over their life. So many women never hear, and men, never hear, well done, you're doing amazing, you're doing great, you're beautiful, you're loved. A lot of people don't hear those things. So we've created this self-love jar. And the idea, or tin,
box,
whatever it might be, you can create this, and over the next let's say, month, your mission is, if you have somebody at home, you can do this for your kids, you can do this for your husband, but you're going to create a self-love jar. So for everybody in your home, so whether that be your children or your husband or anything, you can decorate it, you can make it look pretty. So you're going to every day write on a small piece of paper declarations of words of affirmation that you're going to drop into this jar. So if that's for yourself, I'm going to write, I'm beautiful. I'm going to write the next day, I'm loved. You're valuable. And at the end of the month, once you finish this activity, we want you to read it back to yourself. So this is going to act as a self-declaration to you. And if you live with people, so if you have a parent or a sibling, or you just have a friend, you could do it with a friend.
Well, I recommend you leave your tin, your box, your jar, wherever in a public place. And the reason being so that people can drop those their little notes into your tin. Some of you may remember when I did the women's retreat and we had Love in a Box, and we would every day drop in whether little gifts, but in this case it's notes, so we can drop that into whoever their tin is there, make a little notes every day. You have to do a deposit into either yourself, or you can do yourself and other family members, drop little notes. And you can imagine at the end of the month, and when you empty that out, so you're not allowed to read it till the end of the month.
The kids don't try and get stuff out.
But this is a great thing to do with your children, because I think a lot of the times, and with husbands or men, a lot of the times we just presume that they think that they're doing a good job. And a lot of the time, and I know I've heard this with my dad, that sometimes they don't feel like a great father. Like sometimes they don't feel like they're doing a good job. And I think, we just presume, like, we think you're great, we think you're amazing, and we wait for Father's Day or we wait for, their birthday to write them a nice card.
That's really not enough, is it?
And to deposit those words of affirmation. And I think, for me, I'm very much a card writer, so I like to write cards and notes generally, and I won't wait for like a particular occasion. But it's something that people don't get to hear enough.
But also this generation doesn't write.
Yeah.
And when you write things, they're actually things that you can keep. Most of the times, everything that we have is on a phone.
Yeah.
It's on a device. And, gone are the years when, I don't know if you've ever watched that movie Notebook, one of my favourite. But do you remember when she pulled out the stack of letters that he had written to her? And if that had been emails or texts, she would never have had those.
No, you don't keep them.
But letters you can keep, notes you can keep. So this is something that you can keep for forever. This is something that when your kids are grown, and or like if it's grandparents, messages from grandparents. Because one of the ideas that I had, and I've not yet discussed it with my husband, but I know he'll be on board with it. But one of the things I wanted to do was for us to do prayer over each of our grandchildren individually, and pray a blessing and a declaration over them and record it, so that when we're gone, they have that as something to keep. So it's just creating things that when you're not here, and just because we're getting older, we're thinking of doing things like that, but there is no guarantee that we're all going to get old. So make sure that you're leaving deposits, words of affirmation, because those words are things that people treasure long after you're gone. When those moments are not there. So
I like that idea.
Find what you can, whether it's a tin, whether it's a jar, whether it's a box. You can decorate it. Some of you know what I'm talking about from the women's retreats. Decorate it, make it pretty, but the main thing is not just the focus on the exterior, the focus is on the interior. So make sure that every day there is a deposit, regardless of whether you think they deserve a word of affirmation or not, whether kids are being naughty or the husband's upset you, etc. You still have to deposit. So it's not based on how you feel. You just have to do this regardless. I'm about to fire Jerome. He's there. He just lost his
word of affirmation for today.
But
I think that takes us back to what you said, where you were talking about you know, whether they deserve it or not. I think it takes us to the next part of the topic where, you know, why do people sometimes do the things that they do? And I think, you know, we touched on this last week with mental health and, you know, just talking about why people are the way they are, why they do what they do. And I think a lot of the time we are very reactionary to people. And, you know, we never stop to think, why is it that you've done what you've done? Why is it that you're maybe acting or behaving the way that you've done? And tonight I really want us to kind of discuss and take apart the whole issue of roots, where things, behavioural roots, and behavioural patterns. Why do we do the things that we do? Because everything is as a result of
something.
Absolutely. And I want us to talk about that tonight. So Sam, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think about when we say self-love?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I'll just go back to when I knew this was a topic. I really had to sit down and think, what is self-love? And I think a lot of the times we think about motivational books or people telling you what you are, but I have to say, for me, my self-love, I find it hard, self-love. It's almost like if you don't love yourself, where'd you get love from? And for me, it started from God, because I became a Christian when I was 10 years old, and I had, you know, quite different experiences before then. And I can honestly say I don't think I love myself very much. And it was only until God really started showing me who I was, and I realised that His love was more than enough for me, that I really started to love myself. So I think self-love really comes from knowing who you are. And I know it's a very cliched word, but it's real. I think it's real. I think when you go through bullying, like I was bullied when I was at school, and I faced quite a bit of rejection, and it sort of it's definitely tampered with my self-esteem, who I was, and I kind of felt lost at the end of it. And God just showed me, just because people treat you like that, that doesn't mean that I treat you like that, or I see you like that. And really, it's that process of allowing Him to love me that made me see, oh my gosh, I can really love myself.
If you could pinpoint, though, some of the things that maybe altered that way of thinking, because I know I can pinpoint in different seasons and moments in my life where that altered, and where that wasn't so easy to believe. You know, and I think for me, some of the things that people face and kind of the outward demonstration of that is a lack of self-love, is, you know, some people self-harm. Some people have eating disorders because they are just completely not happy physically with the way that they look. You know, some people have fear of commitment and getting into relationships because they fear rejection and they fear that commitment. You know, so a lot of these outward
symptoms of
so something. I know for you, Sam, that you suffered once with an eating disorder.
So I had bulimia.
So can you talk us through what that season looked like for you, and kind of walk us backwards as to where you believe it started?
So it was university, and I can remember it. It was it just took over my life for those 3 years, and it's actually I'm actually surprised. No, it had nothing to do with that. I think it was definitely the first time I was away from home. And I have a really great support network at home. And so I was away in university in Wolverhampton for 3 years. It was really, I think, the first time where I had to stop and look at myself and look at what I was feeling, and just lots of different things. It was really a time where it was just me and God, and it was rough. It was rough. I had that opportunity to look at what happened to me in my childhood, some abuse that had happened to me. Again, the bullying, and I think sometimes people underestimate how events can really traumatize you. It can be anything. It could be a loss of a loved one. It could be whether it's abuse, or it doesn't have to be anything drastic. But I think if it's anything that makes you feel unsafe, or anxious, or whatever it is, that is trauma. That's what they call trauma, and you have to learn to walk through that. So at university, I didn't know how to deal with my psychological or emotional pain. That's how I put it. And I'd never spoken to anybody about it, how I was feeling. I used to write in my journal, but I had never shared that. So at university, I found that I felt I was overweight, and I would compare myself quite a bit to the girls who are at university. And they never said anything actually about what I looked like or anything, but I just somehow internalized that there was something not right with me. And I just developed this disorder. And yeah, that's what happened. But in that, it made me realise, when I researched what it was, that I had a lot of things going on, lots of layers going on that I really needed to address. It wasn't just about me having an eating disorder. It actually is a symptom of so many other things.
Yeah, and I think there's something that you touched on with identity, and it reminded me of the story of the ugly duckling, you know, where it was, you know, everyone was saying how unattractive it was, and it was walking around trying to find its identity. And funny enough, we were at the park a couple of weeks ago, and there was some ducklings, and they were all grey and they did not look like the finished product. The story kind of made me think, because, you know, you read the story, but we've never actually gone and looked at baby duckling, baby swans, I should say. It was called an ugly duckling, but it was actually a swan. And I was looking at these swans, and it didn't know its identity, and because of it didn't know its identity, and that's one of the things with us, because we can attach ourselves to labels, the label of what was done to you, the label of where you were dropped, the label of where you were broken, and we hang our identity on a negative. So I think one of the important things is that we self-reflect, and we should ask ourselves some questions. And one of the a really powerful scripture is taken from Proverbs 23:7. Says, "For as a person thinks in his heart, so is he." So if I think I'm a failure, if I think there's something wrong with me, or if I think that I'm, you know, guilty of abuse, because it's so incredible how many children or young people adopt the mindset that because they were sexually abused, somebody touched them, that it was their fault. And so that's a label we wear, and then we go around like the ugly duckling and just like, will you love me? Will you love me? Will you love me? And then we're giving ourselves away to the wrong people from a broken place, because we've lost our identity. So it's really important that we fix that. Otherwise we end up in that cycle of hurting and never addressing the issue. And I know it's a sensitive topic, and I know we're peeling off the plaster a bit tonight, and yes, it does hurt, but I know from my personal experience where, you know, we were actually on holiday when the children were smaller, and I remember God, you know, began to speak to me, and it was just so out of context, because I wasn't thinking about anything, but it was just like I felt I needed to go to the room alone. And we'd been at Disneyland for the morning and come back for a break and refresh, and I went in the bedroom, and God began to just like open me up and address those things, because it's so important that we don't hide those things, because just because it's hidden and it's suppressed and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't mean it's gone. Out of sight is not out of mind, because psychologically we're still functioning out of that broken place. And it took a moment. It really was painful to face it. It was very painful to reflect and look at that and have to deal with that. And I remember it took months. It was visiting God on a regular basis and allowing him to fix what was broken in me, because I wasn't functioning right. I wasn't.
And you know it as well.
Yeah, you do.
You know
I knew I was. Right. I knew this wasn't me.
This is not what it reminds me of. The other day, we've got one of those Brita filters. You know, the filter water. The jugs. And this is obviously see-through at the bottom, but it kept leaking. And like from the eye's view, you couldn't see that there was a crack. So all we would see was that there's like a puddle of water underneath the jug every day. And for me, like, I flipped it over, and it was the most minimal, what you'd call a hairline crack. But because of its brokenness, it was seeping, it was releasing the water. And I think a lot of us operate in this place of dysfunction. We don't, a lot of us have suppressed and we buried the issue, but all you can see is what's being produced as a result of that fracture and that brokenness. And it really kind of resonated with me, because you know, from we kind of train ourselves and we program ourselves that we're good, we're okay. We're strong.
We've got it all together.
I think especially within the Christian community, you're told you've got to like so you end up putting on this brave face, but really underneath you're still a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, but where do we get that from?
I don't know. I
Because-
think it's because we mix it up with
With
faith.
faith.
You know, this is faith, and this is how I'm supposed to be. But I've never actually done anything. It's not been resolved. It's unresolved.
Yeah.
And like you say, we're putting on this brave face. We're acting like we're in faith, and I'm good, but we're seeping.
Yeah.
We're seeping.
Yeah. And I like that analogy that you've used, Danny, because you actually had to stop,
Yeah.
have a
And
look
check.
and see and
Yeah.
check
Yeah,
what's
that's
wrong.
so-
So
Something
if I
is
had
wrong
left
here. That's a
it,
self-reflection.
if I had left it, it would continue
Of
leaking.
course.
Yeah.
And you know, it still held water, so
Yeah.
it still functioned.
Yeah.
So to everybody else, you
It
look
still
seem fine,
it
look
could
normal.
still function. You could still catch enough water in it to
Yeah.
pour a glass of water out to catch a drink, and it still filtered through.
Yes.
So it still was able to function
Yeah.
in its use, but it wasn't functioning to its
fullest.
best possible potential. And
Yeah.
I think so many people kind of lay it over and mask over, and they never really go to the root.
Yeah.
And I just want to say to whoever's listening that there is nothing like being whole.
Yes.
And I know we've kind of touched on this in previous episodes, but there really is nothing like being whole. I can't stress enough how much it impacts your life over the course of your life
Yeah.
in different areas, and that thing can spring up from anywhere.
Yeah.
So that broken place
anything.
can affect anything.
Anything. And that's
Yeah.
what we don't realise. I remember years ago we did a course in church on divorce. And so we, you know, people who'd come from, you know, their parents had divorced. And we were quite surprised actually, because we had a lot of older people. We thought we would have got a lot of younger people, but it was actually quite a few people that were, some were even in their late 50s, etc. And we were quite shocked at how that trauma of the parents
Yeah.
splitting up, and they, you know, they didn't all split up when they were small. Some of them split up when they were grown, and they were still affected. I remember seeing somebody who was just like just wouldn't connect, just ran away. You know, anyone got close, they ran away because they couldn't let anyone in. And then there were the ones that wouldn't commit to marriage because of what had happened. And it was incredible because they looked normal until we had that session. But like you say, the leaking was obviously going on. And there was floods of tears. In their 50s, in their 60s, there were floods of tears where this thing was still affecting them. So just because you get older doesn't mean that, you know, it will pass away. You can be 80. And if you've never dealt with that thing, and it's the smallest of things. It could be your parents split up.
Yeah.
It could be, you know, because you could feel rejection, abandonment for all kinds of things. You know, a friend not wanting to be your friend anymore. I remember when I was in my teens, about 16 years old, I remember going to the bathroom. And it was only like we're now talking that's I've not thought about this in years, but it's like this stuff.
Triggers, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's triggers, and this comes up. But I'm fine now; it's not affecting me. But I remember it did affect me. Where I was in the bathroom and I was in the toilet, and a couple of the girls who I thought were my friends came in, and they were at the sink or doing their makeup, and they were talking about me, and they didn't know I was in the bathroom. And you know, I remember feeling devastated. And how many of you that's happened to? You know, because girls can be a bit mean like that. You
But
know,
it goes back to the whole thing. You're not just mean.
Yeah.
Like I just don't think people are
Why are
just
you like
mean. And I think it's then you start to question, why are you the way that you are?
Yeah.
You know, people don't, and I think people are just so quick to accept those labels of themselves. Oh, that's just the way I am. Or, you know, oh, that's the, you know, I'm just, you know, I'm not affectionate. Or, you know, I'm not, you know, some people, they just accept the label. And I think you have to question why.
Yeah.
You know, you really do. Because for me, even a dog, even an animal needs affection. And if that's something that is physical touch, if that's something that is, you know, and I'm not saying everyone has different degrees of what they like.
Thresholds, but
I think when things present to be an issue, everyone that I've known that's been an issue,
there's been deeper levels.
there's a deeper level.
Yes.
And
It's like that. It's that onion syndrome, isn't it? You've got to get to peel the layers.
and that's not pleasant a lot of the
No,
time, especially
no.
if you're grown. Like
Yeah.
it's not pleasant to now start to unpeel, because it's like, okay, you know, you feel good, you feel like you're at a strong
You don't want
place.
to go there.
No one wants to feel weak. No one wants to feel vulnerable. Like nobody wants that.
No, and I think it comes back to that mindset. I think again, and I think I was thinking just in our culture, in terms of black culture, I think we are not, or we don't teach our children, and we probably never taught, if you have an emotional or psychological issue, or you've gone through some form of trauma or stress, first of all, it's a big secret, like you've done something wrong, or you feel so guilty. And so where do you go with that? And I think, you know, if you're not well...
Well, as well, the black culture, you know, I can only talk about it from my home, but it was like, you don't tell anyone your business, you know, so there was that whole, like, you know...
Secrecy
thing. Because I know, like, for me, even within my parents, it's like, you've got to pull information out of them, you know, who was my grandmother, and who was my grandfather? I've just, like, found out my grandfather, his name, just a couple of years ago.
Wow.
But to be honest, I think that's culture. Because I know we go to Jerome's Nan's house, and it's the same thing. Like every time we go, it's like we get a little bit more of the story. And so
you got to
it's literally like, but there's certain aspects where she's like, I don't want to talk about it. Like that's you know, and she's almost because I'm sure that there's parts where it's painful for her. But obviously he wants to know his history. Like he wants to know, where do I come from? Like,
exactly.
Who are all these family members that I have? You know, and I mean, but
that's true.
But the one thing that for me that I see is so much in black culture is that there is a lot of silence.
It's too much silence, and it's killing
and
our children.
So many people
It's killing our children.
suffer in silence. We don't use effective communication. We don't. So we communicate through our actions, and it's behavioural. The way that we kind of release it, because
or we cut off.
So we're not teaching.
We're not teaching. You know, this is what I've seen in our culture anyway. It's like when if we don't want to deal with something, well, let's just cut that off. Or cut that person out of our lives, because rather than have to have that confrontation, have to deal with that thing, our shutdown is let's cut off. Which is not.
But it's not over though,
it's not over. No.
And I think one thing that for me I really wanted to adopt in raising a child and raising children is that communication is something that happens freely. There is no subject is taboo in our home, that you should be able to feel like you can say, talk about anything you need to talk about, because I think there's so much freedom in that, them being able to communicate, because you know, for me, I'm obviously raising a boy child. That boys naturally suppress, and they naturally, you know, don't talk about how they feel, and they don't express emotions really. And for me, that was something that I really wanted to drill and instill into Ashley, because it was so important to me that he knew how to. If there's something wrong or there's something that you're going through, you need to be able to release that, because it's just going to get suppressed, and then you know it then becomes learned behaviour.
Then it becomes anger.
Then it becomes anger, and then it's something that you then carry into adult life, and then before you know it, you've forgotten what the root was, and then you just your behaviour is just manifesting based on that root. So I think it's a really good practice, I think, for all of us to, if you have children, communicate, create that safe space, that safe environment.
Well, we created that years ago, because you know, growing up in a black family, both of us, you know, never, you know, children, we grew up in the environment, children should be seen and not heard. So when you went anywhere with your parents, you never spoke. You just sat there and you just didn't speak. And you know, in our culture, it was like, you know, you didn't have an opinion, and you just didn't ever answer back your parents. You never had an opinion on what they said. It was whatever they said you'd do. So we wanted to change up our family. We didn't want our family raised that way, and we created something in our family where we wanted everyone to have a voice and for everyone to be heard, and to validate that each person's feelings were important. What they had to say was important. I mean, I'll let Danny tell you a little bit about how we did that.
So we basically would have I think it was maybe once a week.
Once a week. Yes.
We would have family meetings, so everyone would sit down and we'd have the spoon.
Whoever's
Whoever had the
speaking.
spoon, because our family's very vocal, so everyone likes to talk over each other. So whoever had the spoon had the voice, basically.
Had
They
the
had
floor.
freedom of speech.
Yeah.
So everyone had to be quiet and listen, and I think that that's such a good practice. And I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day where she's got a teenage son. And, you know, a lot of the times it's quite hard to navigate. And, you know, when you're living in a home where everyone has a different feeling or opinion, everyone feels valid in what they feel. But a lot of the times they don't put themselves in the shoes of others. And I think that that's a really great way. If it's not something that you have or that exists in your home now, I think it's a really great way to start that process. And it may don't expect immediate results, because if your child isn't used to speaking up and they're not used to
it's gonna take a
having
while.
that freedom to communicate, you're gonna need to earn their trust. Because a lot
And
of
how you react.
a lot of parents
Yeah.
are very reactionary.
Yeah.
Like they will just, you know, like, how dare you? There, slap it.
Well, that was one of the rules with this exercise in our house. No one was allowed to get angry.
Yeah.
No one was allowed to get upset. We had to hear each other out neutrally. So even if, like, the kids said to us, you know, we didn't actually agree with the way you disciplined us, and we didn't think it was fair, we didn't think it was right, they had the floor, they had the opportunity to say that, and we couldn't retaliate. And we wanted to create that safe place that I can say anything and there's no consequences. And it wasn't abused, it wasn't no one was rude, and it was very valid. But we had to learn as parents to listen to our children, and that's so important. If you're a parent, it's so important, especially if you're a person of colour, it's so important that you hear your children, that you hear their voice, you hear their heart, because unless you give them that platform to speak, you don't know what's going on, you don't know what they're going through. And so we don't want to wait until something drastic happens and they may harm themselves or whatever. We want to hear what's going on, and it's a great way to check that
they're okay.
They're okay, actually, because that's where you can tell if that one's introverted. You know, something is amiss there.
But also, I think that we have to get into consciously be ready to break the cycles that's kind of been instilled in us, because a lot of it is just learned behaviour. So we're just duplicating what was done to us, and that was done to our parents, and that's at some point you have to take the stand and say, you know what, I'm going to be the one that breaks this cycle. You know, because it's just going to keep repeating itself. And I can't stress enough how in touch we need to be with our young people, because you know, it's a different world, and I say this to everybody, it's a different world to the one that we grew up in. So it's great to say, oh, but in my day, it's not your day.
Shows you're getting old now.
Completely
You can
different.
say that
It's not
now.
your day. And I'm very aware that my day isn't Ashley's day. It's
so
very
different.
It's so different, and the things that he has to face and come up against is so different. Like we never had the struggle of social media.
Right.
That wasn't our reality. I remember when he was born, digital cameras just
Came out.
That makes me sound really old. But it's technology. Technology has evolved so quickly, and
scary.
they are the first generation of this social media world. So, and I think we have to get in touch with what that looks like, and not parent based on what we feel like we were parented 20, 30 years ago. So it's really about being conscious and actually really taking the time to know our children, and not what they decide to show to us, but actually really knowing your kids, because
and it starts from young, doesn't it?
It does start from young, and it's opening that channel of communication from a really young age. We've got a question. How would you help adults who are so close even when you can sense they have a problem?
Say that again.
So how would you help adults who are so closed even when you can sense they have a problem? So a lot of the times we can see stuff in other people, so we could see the cracks, the fine cracks, and because we're kind of on the receiving end of their outward, how they're expressing, you know, that place of brokenness. How would you help somebody? Because obviously you can't, and I would know that you can't force yourself on people.
No.
No, I think it depends who it is, really.
Yeah.
If it's a friend, a really good friend, or you know, a family member, and you're nice to them, they know that you're a good person. I think it's a conversation, and it's not. Don't be critical of them,
and don't
just
push.
and don't
push.
yeah,
I
exactly.
think,
And they may not want to open up to you, which is
away.
fine, straight away, and just say, look, I don't want to, you know, pry or anything, but. Or say, look, have you ever thought of, I think you might need some help.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with wanting help. And have you thought of maybe seeing a counsellor? Or have you thought about speaking to someone? Or when you're ready, I am here to have that conversation. So I think that's really all you can do.
I think for me, I know when I was friends with my husband before we got together. And for me, it was really about us building that trust. And I remember I think we had been friends for maybe like 2 years before I felt like I could have that, like I could open up, and he was like a safe place for me. And I think that for somebody that's been hurt, your automatic thing is to be defensive. You're not going to want to let people in. It's that automatic reflex. It's like a reflex, you know, because you were talking about obviously going back to the root of things, but usually, you know, if something's coming towards you or something's being thrown, if a ball's being thrown at me, my automatic reflex is to protect myself. So I think it's a slow process. Healing is a very slow process. It's not something that, okay, I'm good today, you know, okay, I reckon I've identified it, I'm good now. It's a gradual process. And I think anyone that has allowed God to really heal them and has total freedom now will testify to the fact that it's a slow process, because a lot of the time it's just like a surgery. You don't recover in a week. It's an ongoing process, and sometimes you need physical therapy. Sometimes it's a constant process.
And even when you think you feel like, you know, you're fine, it's still healing takes time, and you've got to recognize that. I remember when I had gallbladder surgery, and I haven't been put under anaesthetic yet, and I'm speaking to the surgeon, and I'm like, when can I go back to the gym? And so that was the last thought I had before I went into surgery. When can I go back to the gym? And he said to me, I'm using keyhole, but he said, if you go back to the gym within, I think he told me a year, he said, because of the depth of the wound, listen to this, the depth of the wound. The deeper the wound, the longer it takes to heal. And even when it looks healed on the surface, he said to me, it's not healed. He said, don't be fooled because the skin is healed, but the depth of the wound, because obviously it's got to go through all the layers in my stomach to get to that gallbladder to remove it. He said, it's a year. And he said, if you don't listen to my advice, you're going to rupture, and then I'm going to have to open you up, and then you're going to have this massive scar. So as much as I wanted, I think I still did. I still went back in the gym earlier, but I was working out with caution based on the information that he had given me, and he was very serious about it. So based on the depth of the wound, it's not just having that moment where I identify it and I think I'm good now. It's recognizing the process takes time.
So let's talk about some of the things that kind of outwardly display themselves. So, you know, you might think, oh, I'm good. I don't really have, that's not me. I don't know what you're talking about. This doesn't relate to me. But let's talk about some of the ways that, you know, because sometimes we do, like I said, we just accept things. So we have insecurity. So you don't love yourself, so you always feel the need to compete with others. And what that looks like is, I know you've experienced this, where you've had a friend that if you can never celebrate people, and it's always, okay, as long as I'm doing better than you, then I'm good. But the moment somebody seems to be doing a little, you know, good, you seem to have an issue with it. That's not okay.
No.
If someone wears something that's nicer than you, or what you portray to be nicer than yours, or they're looking too nice, or they've lost weight, or their hair's nice, or whatever it might be, if there's like a tinge in you, you need to address that. That's come from somewhere. It doesn't just, we don't just become insecure people.
Well, I had a friend, I mean, and this really taught me a lesson, because I thought I don't want to be an old person that's dysfunctional. And that was my mindset. And that caused me to self-reflect and ask myself some real questions, because I did not want to be that person where I'm 60, 70, 80 and I've still got issues that I've never dealt with. And that's got to be something you've got to make a decision. I don't want to be turn 40, 50, 60, however old you are. You may be a young person, but I don't want to be in that age group and still be dysfunctional and have issues. And so I had this friend, and wherever we went, you know, if we went on holoday together, while we had one suitcase, this friend would have three, and I didn't think anything of it. I'm just like, wow, okay, you pack a lot. But what I didn't realize was this was an insecurity thing. I didn't identify it. But the person would come down, we'd go out for dinner, and they'd come down, and then they would disappear, go back to their room, and I didn't even notice, but they'd go and change because they wanted to look the best, and it was an insecurity thing. And now I'm looking back, and it affects friendships, but then I'm looking back, and I remember one of the things that this person would always say is that they were the darkest one in their family. And so the mother would always make negative remarks throughout her childhood, all the way up, about how dark she was, and the emphasis was criticism. So she was always from that, from somebody commenting on the shade of your skin. Your siblings are fairer than you, and so that as a child she perceived that as a negative, and obviously there's nothing much you can do about the shade of your skin.
Well, people bleach.
Well, they'll bleach, but
try to
even that is from that place of
external
insecurity.
change. It doesn't change how you feel.
And
on the
I
inside.
really, when you were speaking, that really was in my spirit, like to address sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes we just accept it as sibling rivalry. Oh, all siblings, you know, fight each other, or you know. And a lot of parents are very guilty of playing one kid against the next, or other children. And a lot of parents do that. Oh, you're smarter. Oh, you get better grades.
Wants more academic.
You have to be so careful.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be parenting every child the same anyway, because every child is different.
They're an individual.
You know, but there's so much life and death in your words, and what you project onto your children, and what you're molding them. And, you know, when you compare their sibling with them, that's a seed.
Yeah.
And it's taking root.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you've been guilty of that, you really need to go back and address that. As a parent, if you're guilty of comparing one child to the next, even if, you know, and every child's going to be different. You know, some children are more pleasing than other children. You know, some children are very naturally gifted in lots of different things. You know, where some children are quite introvert. Celebrate each child and what their strengths, and don't ever focus on the negatives. And I think it's so important as parents that we do not zone in on those negatives and compare one child to the next. I think that leads to huge dysfunction as they get older. And I think for me, my goal is that when we have children, that even after I'm dead and gone, that they still can work as a unit. It shouldn't be that we're the only ones holding them together.
And you see that so much in families.
You see it so much.
As soon as the parents are gone, the siblings, that's the end of that connection.
And it's fueled by the parents. That's the root of it. And everything starts. And I think if we can get into that mentality that everything has a root, and it's about tracing back to that root and finding why is this the way it is. Another thing that we want to address is self-harm. So you don't, no one, you know, and when you're thinking, and I think this is crossed over into the mental illness realm, no one intentionally wants to, you know,
hurt themselves.
Cutting yourself hurts. You know.
But it's creating a deflective pain.
It's a distraction, isn't it?
Because it's a distraction, because I'm trying to make this pain, and it reminds me, what did I used to do? I think it was at the dentist. When I would go for the dentist, I hate like having needles punched into my gums, and obviously you need the injections to numb your mouth. But I would, I can't remember what it was I used to do. But I used to create a pain somewhere else. If I had to have an injection in my arm or something, I'd bite my lip. I'd bite my lip on the inside, because I was creating a pain to distract me from that pain. And I think that's what self-harm is. You create a pain to distract you from the real pain.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to, because I hate needles, I hate injections. So I created
Another pain.
But
it doesn't.
It doesn't work. It doesn't
Stop the pain.
It's just
from
like got
being
sore
yours.
mouth
Exactly.
now.
That's why it's psychological, so it doesn't actually make any logical sense.
No, it doesn't.
But yeah, I think it's that it's all symptoms though, whether it's you overeat, or you've got a bad relationship with food, or you drink, you're an alcoholic, or you get into bad relationships. It's all
it triggers.
These are all things of things
or you have
here.
fear of relationships.
Fear of relationships.
Yeah, fear of having children.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
These are
It
all real
comes
things.
from, and a lot of times it comes from most of the time it's from our experiences.
Yeah.
Well, I watched a movie this week, and it was called
When We Were Children.
When We Were Children,
Yeah.
and it was all these Indians that lived in Canada. I'm talking like the Indians that lived there, you know. So like America, you have the Red Indians,
Right.
and so they took all the children away from the parents and put them in these Catholics run homes. And the abuse.
Oh, wow.
So they had two survivors that they were talking to about the abuse that they went through, and the gentleman, he was actually about to go and kill himself. He'd obviously grown up in the home. He'd left as an adult, and he had children of his own. And he said he was going up the mountains with his rifle to go and end his life because he was had not dealt with the pain. And he said two of his children followed him.
Oh wow.
And when he saw them, obviously he couldn't do it.
Oh wow.
But then he thought about it, that he doesn't ever want his children to end up in a place like that. But it was interesting what he said. Everybody from that home that had been abused, they either were alcoholics or they committed suicide. And the reason that the alcoholism is escape, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's promiscuity, all of these things are escapes because I don't want to face that. So I'm going to find something, and it doesn't take away. It just numbs me for an hour or two or moment because I can't. This now is overwhelming me. But that's not the healthy way forward, right?
And I think also when there has been a place of trauma, because I can hear a lot of people asking the question, okay, but you've spoken about, you know, all the outward symptoms, you know, just like if you, for example, you had a rash on come out on your face or on your arm, you would go to the doctor to treat the symptoms.
Yeah.
A lot of people have the symptoms, but they don't know how to get to the root of obviously the cause and the problem.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the brain is a very clever organ. It's very, very clever in the sense that it has a great way of, at a place of trauma, it almost allows your mind to forget or to block out.
Yeah.
To deal with it. Yeah.
To cope and to deal with it. And a lot of people, you will feel like you're good, but all you're just seeing is the manifestation, but you just can't remember.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing, that there's a lot of people that have had traumas happen to them. I was one of them. But your mind just blocks it out because it's your brain's way of coping and to deal with it.
You need to survive,
You need to survive and you just need to get on, but you just know that something's not quite right. And I know for me that was a real thing, and it was a frustration because you're like, I just want to be good. Like I just want to function like a normal person. Like I want to feel like I'm complete. I want to feel like I'm making decisions in the right frame of mind. Like from a whole place. And I think that's such a frustration. And you know, I went to God and I was like, God, like I don't want to be this person. I don't want to live this way. And whatever it is, show it to me. And it's scary because you're scared of what you're going to see and what he's going to reveal to you. And I think that God's so gracious that he walks you through just like a surgery. He works on you and he works on you and he takes out all the parts that are not good and he works on you and he continues to work on you until eventually one day you actually don't realize
you're whole.
What you've gone through,
that you're good and that you're whole and that he's healed you and he's worked on you. And he's so gracious in the way that he works because you know, he takes that thing and he literally carries it from you. He takes it from you. But it's that first step. It's like an addict. It's that first step of self-identification.
Yes, of saying, you know, this is how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going through. And I think a lot of the times as Christians, we can almost feel like we have to come to God in a way, like in this stance of, oh my gosh, I've got it all together.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, you know, God knows anyway. And you can literally come to him exactly as you are.
Absolutely.
I remember a couple of years ago, we had, me and some of my friends, including Sarah, we had a car accident. And it was trauma for me. I was a driver, and I know we all experience different things, but I know for me, and I've actually had counselling because of it, I was petrified to get back into the car.
Yeah.
It was trauma, and it really took a long time for me to say to God, I have a problem. I have a problem with getting in the car. Every time I get in the car, I shake. I have so much anxiety and just the shame that was attached to it. So whatever it is, whether it's blame, shame, guilt, like my friend, my gosh, what if they died? And just all of this stuff. And I really had to just give it all to him. And he's not afraid of your anxiety. He's not afraid of your shame. He's not afraid of your weakness. The fact is, we all have weaknesses. He knows us. We shouldn't be ashamed of bringing God our not best, basically, and I think he's okay with that.
Yeah, and I think find somebody that you can trust and that you can talk to, because I think, you know, whether that's you went to a counsellor.
I went to a counsellor. I spoke to my husband. Yeah, so I have I had a really good
counselors.
Whether that's a friend, I opened up to a friend of mine as well, and I said, this is, you know, this is what I'm feeling. And I trusted her, and she gave me really good advice, and she still walks through it with me. It's just having that support network and knowing whatever it is. The first point is to say, look, I know I'm not okay. And I have a problem. And it's okay to say that. And then it's the second thing is, now what do we do?
And just to touch on that, I think there's a lot of negative stigma, especially with Christians, to go and seek counsel. And that it's almost like looked down upon to see a counsellor. But the reality is it goes back to...
Well, if you're sick, you have to go to the doctor.
But I think
they're the ones that can fix your physical bodies,
But I think if you think about what a counsellor's role is to basically get that information out of you.
And they have the tools
to navigate that through that with you. And I think I go back to the point where it's so powerful to speak, and it's so powerful to communicate, because you can see a counsellor all day long, but unless you actually do something
with it
and speak to them, then you're never going to heal. You're never going to get better. And I think that there's so many people that suppress and don't speak, and that's the start of your healing. That's the first step in your journey, in your healing journey, and in your process. Trust me, it will make you a better mother. It will make you a better wife. It will make you a better sister, a better friend. If you can function as a whole person.
And can I say, there's no shame. There's no shame. Get rid of the shame. Get rid of the guilt, and just accept this is something in me that needs to fix. Like if I go to the doctors and because I've got a chest pain or I've got back pain or I feel like something's wrong inside, I go to somebody because I want to be made whole. I don't want to just leave this, and to leave something not knowing what it is and not knowing the damage it may be doing. I could end up finding out when it's too late, when I could have fixed it and had the doctor could have done what they needed to do, but now because I've ignored it, how many people have been told, oh, well, actually, you've only got, if you'd come in the early stages, we could have helped you, now it's too late. So I just want to encourage you, don't accept this as part of your life, and we're good at that, especially us women. You know, we're good at accepting. I went through that for years. I always had back pain, and that's my lot. You know, I've adjusted my life to live with this pain. Don't stop adjusting your life to live with pain.
But it reminds me of when I remember speaking at one of the women's retreats. And it was like such a burden that I carried, because I think I was speaking on like the third day or something. But it's literally like I can't describe it, but it literally felt like I was carrying the burden of every woman on that retreat. I felt so heavy, and I was literally ready to just let it go. I was like, oh, seriously, this is a lot. But there were so many broken women, and for me, the body's way of expelling pain is through tears. And a lot of women struggle to cry, and they think it's a sign of weakness, but it's your body's way of releasing pain, and you have to don't shy away from it.
Don't be
Well, you
afraid
know
of it.
what? When you hold it all in, you just harden yourself.
Yeah.
Because you know, when I was talking about when I had that experience when we were in Florida, and I cried and cried and cried, and every time that God worked on me, it was floods of tears, floods of tears, and eventually the tears stopped.
Yeah.
And eventually the memories don't go. You still have memory. God's not going to erase the memory, but I can think about it, I can talk about it, and now there's no longer any emotion there. There's no more pain there.
Yeah.
But that's when you know you're healed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause you
That's
talk about,
when-
it was
you
like an
can-
outside person
Yes.
talking about an event that didn't
Yes,
happen to you
yeah.
because there's no emotion
There's
connected
no
to it.
emotion anymore.
Yeah.
The memory's there.
Yeah.
And it's you don't even think about it, to be
No.
quite honest, unless something happens that triggers it. But you can now think about it, and you don't feel like I need to go cry because this hurts still. And that's when you know. That's how you check. That's how you can say, I'm actually over that.
Yeah.
And the way that God does it, He does it so gently. So don't be scared to go to God. Don't be afraid to get help.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to go and seek out.
Yeah.
How did you actually find the Christian counselor? Was it recommendation or
Actually,
how?
no. I didn't actually know he was a Christian counsellor. I just looked at a lot of reviews online.
Okay.
And then it was in a conversation, our first counselling session, and I just was speaking about being a Christian, whatever, and he was like, I knew it. I just knew that you're a Christian. And he's been a Christian for a while, and he was
Okay.
like, this is going to be great. And I
Oh,
said,
wonderful.
well, so it wasn't intentional,
Yeah, okay.
but I definitely think it's good to go to a Christian counsellor.
Yes, yeah.
And obviously just check them out and make sure that they're okay.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to say for those women who may still have a connection to an event or emotion to an
Yeah.
event, it's a process
Yeah.
and it's a journey, and it's not something that is an overnight thing. So it takes a while, and I think a lot of the times as women we're not kind to ourselves,
Yeah.
and we can be patient with everyone else, we can
Yeah.
be patient with our children. But when it comes to us, we're
Yeah,
almost
we're more
like
critical.
we're very critical.
Yeah.
We want it, sort of done and
Yeah.
dusted
Yeah.
straight away.
Yeah.
And just whatever help you can get it.
Yeah. And
Go
even
for
as a
it.
friend, be that friend that is there. And, I've got some amazing friends, and they're there whether I want to talk or not. They'll come and they're with me, and they'll never probe or push. Because sometimes you may not even want to talk. You just... to know that you have a support system around you that actually loves you, cares for you, and they're there for you is more than words. So just make sure that the friends you have are that kind of friend, and they don't look for a crowd of them. Usually you find them on one hand.
Yeah, for sure. Somebody's asking Sam, do you still have his details?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
we will
post
share
that
that
for you.
on
I'll share it.
this
He'll be
on
very,
this
very
post.
happy.
I'm sure he will be. Yeah,
You're on a stream.
Let me cue women.
It's just, you know what it is? I think it's
So
also
how many
nice.
sessions did you
So
see?
I've had 4 sessions.
Is there a prize?
Yeah, there's a price. It
How
was like
much?
300 and something pounds or something.
For the
Yeah.
4?
For the 4 sessions.
Okay.
And then you could book another 4. So I want to book another 4. I just need to find
Okay.
the time to do it.
Okay.
But I think it's
But you
there's
felt
quite,
it helped you tremendously.
do you know what it is? I think it's just having that space where you can talk about whoever you want to talk about first of all,
And it's
with
neutral.
and it's neutral. There's no
Yeah.
strings
Yeah.
attached. They don't know who the
Yeah.
person is, and you can feel free to speak your reality and your truth.
Yeah.
There's no judgment.
Yeah.
And you just and I could, even now I'm going through the sessions, I could hear myself speaking about things that I didn't even know was there.
Yeah.
And when you hear it,
He
and
knows
then
how to draw it
he
out,
knows how
yes.
to draw it out,
Yeah.
and then it was also speaking about things and how I resolved it in my mind. And he's like, "It's interesting that you've come to that resolution. Why?"
Yeah.
And he gave me a different angle, and I was
Yeah.
just like, "Wow, I never actually thought that."
Wow.
So it was really, really for me, it was
Yeah.
great, and
So
I would encourage
we're
everyone
gonna
to
go and
do it.
go and see him.
Also, I mean, I had to pay for it, but I mean, if you are going through anything else, you can go to your GP.
Yes.
And
yeah.
they would refer you for free, so you can go and see. I mean, if it's whatever the situation is, they can refer you to a counsellor, and you can
Okay.
get some free sessions.
I think you
afterwards,
maybe
pay.
just have to be a little bit careful with what you say to your GP, because I know
Yes.
a lot of
Oh,
the
yeah.
times
Goes
that
on
often
record.
they're trying to put
Yeah.
you on antidepressants, because if it's, if you mention
Yeah,
like
we're
it's
running out
affecting
of time.
Your moods, right? Okay, I didn't think about that, but yeah.
So, but we will definitely post his
Yes,
details
guys.
up to share with you
Run out
guys.
of time again.
wow.
Please tell him that
Okay.
Sam sent you.
quick.
Yes.
So
Yes,
that
please.
she can get a discount. So yeah, just a disclaimer, we're not trained counsellors.
No.
Yes,
This is
absolutely.
Girl Talk.
Yeah.
We are literally just, if this is our own opinions,
Yes.
and we're obviously just trying to kind of put the topic out
Yeah.
there so that it's something that you can kind of take and address.
But please seek professional.
Get help. There's
We
also
always
helplines. So some of the issues that we spoke about,
Yes.
self-harm, anorexia, bulimia, there are helplines out
Absolutely.
there where you can call them up and they can give you professional help.
Yeah.
And we will post those with this video. So,
So,
do you want to pray for everybody? Just pray us out.
Yes. Father, we thank you for every person online, Father God. We just pray for you to do work in each one of us, Father God. There's so many areas that may be broken in our lives. And Father God, I know that this has probably brought up to the surface many things that people are going through right now. But I pray that first of all, you be the healer, that you'll be their strength, that you be their comfort, that you be their guide, and that you'll guide them, Father God, to the right places, to the right people that can genuinely help them to move forward. We ask you to make them whole tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So
Just a
we're-
quick one. Danielle Gorey says, "I'm sorry that I let you all down. I wish I can make it right. I don't know what's wrong with me. So many issues that manifest in so many ways. I feel like I'm hated and judged. Don't know what to do." Are you guys able to give maybe a email address that she can contact?
Yes.
you?
Yeah, Danielle, if you can just reach out to me. I know you're on Instagram as well quickly. We're literally running out of time. Email the church at btbchurch@aol.co.uk, or you can inbox one of us and we'd love to be able to talk to you. But we're out of time, so we will
Guys.
see you guys next week for another episode of Girl
Girl
Talk.
Talk.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.